Vernava for NESN.com, and I am joined today by Herschel Walker. Herschel, thank you so much for talking with us today.
No, thank you for having me on.
I need to know, after your prolific NFL career, how have you managed to stay in such great shape?
Well, I'm always competing. I tell people I'm a competitor in life because, going into the business world was a competition for me. And, I got onto a regiment when I was young of all the push-ups and sit-ups, and it almost became like a drug to me. That whenever I get up in the morning, I have to do my push-ups, I have to do my sit-ups, I have to go out for a run. And because I was doing those things, I wanted to continue to compete. So whatever I can find that I'm going to compete in, and I don't want to compete in it at no local level. I want to do it nationally. I want to do it against some of the best in the world, and that's the way I go about things.
Was that the key to your recipe for success and sustained athleticism and staying in good shape? Was it starting at a young age and that hunger for competition that you just described?
It was. One of the things it was, I grew up a fat kid, overweight, where a lot of kids in my school at the time wouldn't give me the time of day. They wouldn't even play with me. For 4 years, I never went out for recess. And I used to have a speech impediment where the teachers used to put me down, and they didn't think that I could ever learn. And so at one point in my life, enough was enough. I started training. I started doing these things. I started to feel good about myself. And I think that's when it took off. And at that time today, I don't ever want to go back to that place. That's the reason I speak out against bullying. That's the reason I speak out against a lot of things that I think is unjust, that, everyone has feelings. And at that time, I was very hurt by those. And I know now that if you continue to work, and I tell kids this all the time, is you got to love yourself first. And you got to be willing to work, that things are not going to always go your way, but that's okay. Continue to get up when you get knocked down, and that's what you got to do in life, and that's what I've been doing, and I keep doing it.
What was that point that was the final straw that you said enough was enough?
The point was in the 8th grade, the end of the school year, I got beat up by a kid. He beat me up, and I remember going home crying, and all the kids thought it was funny. And that summer, and this was fun, as soon as I got home, as I was watching television, I can remember this voice saying, enough was enough. That won't happen again. And I went outside and I started training. And that's when I came up with the amount of push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups. And I started going, getting books, start reading to myself. That's why I encourage kids today to pick up things and start reading. Read to yourself, and that you can overcome things. And I started doing it. And I think now I learned that through hard work, before when I was feeling bad about, when I was feeling down on myself, I didn't do anything. You go home, you may eat a few bonbons on the couch, sitting there watching TV, not doing anything. But then when I realized enough was enough, I got off that couch. I started going outside, started running, started climbing trees, started swinging, doing the monkey bars, started doing those things, and started to feel good about myself. I started then going to the library, getting books where when I go into the classroom, I felt confidence when I started speaking. It was not that I didn't know it. I knew what was going on, and that's what gave me the confidence. And that's why I tell all kids, we're blessed that they have something to offer, but they got to be willing to work that. Everyone thinks Stephen Curry was born to even shoot that three-pointer. And as a guy, Stephen Curry has been doing this since he was like 5 years old. This ain't where he just started. He's been doing this forever. So don't think that you can just pop up and start doing these things. You got to work at it. And sometimes it's not going to go your way, but that's okay. It is okay to get into the crossroads of life, but what you got to do is make a decision. Because if you stand there, you will get run over. Make a decision, because it may be the wrong decision, but you can always turn around. And that's what I've learned in life.
Not only does it sound like you have an extremely admirable work ethic, but also a great attitude, that you were able to go through something difficult at a young age and not become bitter or resentful. What would your advice be to someone who might be at that crossroads where they're saying enough is enough, but that might be heading down the wrong road?
Well, my advice to them is to remember that you don't want to be good in life. You want to be great, because the Lord doesn't make mistakes. I said early on, I've been blessed, and I really have, but I also had some shortcomings. And I tell everyone, you got to look up to go up. things are not going to always go your way, but you got to look at life as a positive, as a blessing. And the reason I say that is, you know what, I've had many failures as I had successes, but I don't look at those as failures. I look at those as learning opportunities. You know, when you make like 80 on a test and you think you should have made 100, sometimes you go and look at what you may have missed and you learn something new. So I've learned that you always got to look up. You always got to get up. And, you know, I remember, you know, in Rocky, and watching Rocky, when Rocky got beat up by the kid that he taught to box in this alleyway, and Rocky's laying in his alleyway feeling down on himself. And I remember Mick came to Rocky, said, "Get up, you bum. Get up. It ain't over. One more round." And Rocky get up, the music started, and Rocky go handle business. I said, there's a guy that has died for us in our lives, that is always telling us, no matter how many times we get knocked down, to get back up. One more. And that's what you got to do, because you will get knocked down. And I tell kids that all the time. I'm going to tell you right now, you will get knocked down. I go in a class of 30 kids, and I say, guys, some of you may make it, and some of you may not, but you don't have to be that statistic that do not make it. You always look up and say that I am successful. You always say that you are somebody. You always love yourself, and you're going to be okay.
Well, you have certainly a great deal of mental grit and toughness. How much weight would you put on your mentality in terms of how it has affected the way you've been able to physically train your body and stay healthy throughout an NFL career and into your 50s and still be in such great shape, especially nowadays where we're looking around the NFL and we see players retiring at younger ages, sort of short shelf life of running backs, and injuries being a huge issue on the table right now?
You got to be mentally extremely strong, because it is very, very difficult. It is difficult because this world is what have you done for me lately world, that if you can't do it, people are going to forget all about you. And you got to be mentally strong, that you got to keep yourself motivated. You got to keep yourself going. And for myself, that's what I do. I said, guys, you know, I'm going to keep going no matter what happens. I got to be mentally strong. You know, when I got into this MMA world, first thing people say is, why are you doing this? You're too old. You're this, you're that. And I say, you can't listen to that. Because once you start listening to what people put on you, that's what you become. You got to listen to what you put on yourself. And I learned that as a little boy. When I remember the doctors told my mom and dad that my legs were bad, my knees were bad, and he said, well, Herschel not going to be like any of those other kids. And my mom said, you know what, he's not the true doctor. And I didn't know what she meant by then, and what she meant by then is, Herschel, continue to have your faith, continue to do what you're doing, and you're going to be okay. But when you start listening to what other people put on you, you will become that. But what you got to do is think of yourself as something more.
Now, as you mentioned, your career as an athlete didn't end when you retired from the NFL. You are now involved in MMA. Can you give us a little brief overview of your fighting career?
Yes. You know, when I was in college, I went to play football games on Saturdays. I would go to church Sunday morning, and I fought in Taekwondo tournaments Sunday afternoon. So martial arts has been something I've always have loved. I've gotten my 5th dan in Taekwondo years ago. And when mixed martial arts came along, I was like, wow, man, that look exciting. That's a mano-to-mano, stepping in this cage, you against him like a human chess match. And I had no idea how to get to it. So I put the word out that I wanted to fight. And I'll tell you what, a guy came along by the name of Scott Coker, who's running Bellator now. Scott Coker came along, and he took me out to California to do what they call a matchmaker bout, where I had to fight 5 different guys in 5 different rounds in 5 different disciplines. And after that, after I finished that, Scott Coker turned to me and he said, Herschel, if you promise to go to a good camp, good training camp, I will get you a fight. Well, I went out to I went out to San Jose, California, to AKA. I started training there for about 8 months. I trained out in San Jose for about 8 months before I got my first fight. I trained 7 days a week for 8 months. And I tell you what, I absolutely love this sport. I learned so much in this sport. I thank Scott Coker, and right now Scott Coker and I are doing Bellator, and that's one reason that I'm excited to be with Scott Coker. Scott knows this field. Scott Coker, I think he became the promoter of the year for MMA. Scott Coker has been around this MMA for a long time. You know, now he's put it on this Bellator 149. They have some legends with Shamrock and Gracie and Kimbo Slice and Dada. fighting, and I'm happy to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, we do have Bellator 149 coming up. Can you give us a little preview of what you think will shake out during that?
Well, I'll tell you what, on Spike TV on Friday night at 9 o'clock Eastern, they're going to put on Legends of Fighting. And you talking about Legends of Fighting, you're going to think about a guy by the name of Ken Shamrock. He was one of the first guys on a UFC card. And Gracie, when you talk about Gracie fighting, you talk about jiu-jitsu. These are the people that brought jiu-jitsu to the United States. Well, these two guys are going to hook up. And this is a fighting that's been in the making for a long, long time. And what's wild is Gracie today, at his weight class, at his age, I guarantee you no one at his weight class will fight this guy today. And Kim Shamrock has stepped up to the plate, say he want to fight it. And now you're going to talk about true fighting. You talk about people getting in the backyard, slugging it out. You're talking about somebody by the name of Kimbo Slice, which is a YouTube sensation. Not only is he a YouTube sensation, this guy has got the record of the most watched MMA fight of all time. This guy is going to step into the cage against a young man by the name of Dada 5000. Dada 5000 and Kimbo Slice used to be the best of friends. This Dada 5000 was Kimbo's bodyguard, and now they've had this beef with each other for years. They do not like each other, do not want to be in the same room with each other, and now they're going to hook up in a cage where they got to fight. So that's going to be an incredible, incredible fight, along with a lot of other people on the card. And I tell you what, Scott Coker has put together a great card that people can watch for free. And whenever you mention free, that's what's so great about it. You don't have to pay anything. Just go to Spike Friday night, and you can catch it.
It sounds like it's definitely going to be a great event, and it is a double main event, as you mentioned. And again, it's on Spike TV at 9 p.m. Eastern. I will definitely be watching. But Herschel, do you have any fights coming up on the horizon?
Well, I've told Scott and I've told everyone I'll do one more. I love to do one more fight, and I even like to do more. My thing is I've been very blessed in the business world. I have businesses that are doing well, and plus I'm a father of a 16-year-old that's competing as well, and I promise to be at all his events. And if you're going to be an MMA fighter, you got to be it all the time. It ain't something you can do part-time. You got to do it all the time. But I still train, and I still love stepping to the cage and see what I got.
Well, you mentioned some interesting things, which is family, health, age, and as we look at a guy like people speculating over when Peyton Manning should retire, what is your input on when you think an NFL player should hang up the cleats?
Well, NFL players should hang up the cleats when he feels that it's time for him to do it. And the reason I say that, because you don't want to leave this game thinking about what I should have done or what I can do, or all that, because if you do that, you're always going to be regretting things. Right now, everybody's saying Peyton Manning should retire. Peyton Manning should do this. He didn't have a good year last year. Well, they won the Super Bowl. Whether he did a great thing in the Super Bowl or not, they won the Super Bowl, which meant they're the best team in the NFL. Well, if it's time for him to retire, it may be time, but everyone wants to see him make the announcement. He got to make the announcement when he want to do it. Right now, he just won the Super Bowl, and I said, guys, let this man enjoy himself from doing that. Why do you have to announce that he's going to retire? And everyone said, well, in March, the Denver got to decide whether they're going to pay him. And I said, guys, Denver will tell this young man, you know what, you can do this. We'll restructure your contract and let him retire when he wants to do it.
How much do you think health and physical fitness plays into both when a football player should retire or when an MMA fighter should walk away from the sport?
Well, that plays a big role, plus mentally. If a player has had, now these head injuries has become a big thing in the NFL. If you had concussions, you should think about getting out of it. Reason why is just what I talked about earlier, family, your faith, and different things like that. Being able to go forward in life, not just as a player now, but now you got to go as a businessman, as a father, as a husband. So your mental state is very, very important. Now, when you talk about doing other things, and I think that plays a huge, huge role, because that's what people got to do. And getting out of the game when you're healthy with being physical fit, that's important. Guys today, in football leave the game, you see them limping, you see them sore, arthritis set in, and, at age 40-something, they're looking old. That's why I tell kids all the time, get an education. And education is so important because at 28, 30 years old, they'll say you're too old to play the sport. But you can be president at 60. And that's why I say an education is so, so important.
Now, you, though, have almost seemed immune to the wear and tear of the NFL, of MMA, but we have seen almost a rise in injuries and complaints from players. Again, I mentioned earlier, players walking away from the game earlier than we're used to seeing. Do you think that there's a difference in the way guys condition now? Is there something they can be doing to better prepare their bodies to avoid these types of injuries?
Well, it's hard to say if they can avoid the injuries, but I think they got to continue to go out and work. I think getting yourself in great shape, getting ready for the season, and when the off-season comes, totally getting out of shape and trying to build yourself back up. I think during the off-season, keep yourself at a norm where you don't really get totally out of shape, but you can take your body, take it through a little bit of a rest period, but continue to go out and run, cycle, swim. You continue to keep those joints moving. And that's what I've always done in life. I've never really totally got out of shape. I kept myself at that even keel where when it's time for me to go, I can get myself right back into the condition. But I think taking your body through an extreme as getting totally out of shape, getting back in, getting out, getting back in, takes your body through a lot of stressful moments. And then getting banged up with the head injuries, that plays a huge, huge role in what you can do.
Yeah, the head injuries, the concussions, are a main concern right now. What do you think is the solution to the concussion issue? Is there a way that the NFL can change the game without compromising the game, but also so that the players are at minimal risk for these head injuries?
Well, one of the things I think the NFL is doing, they're really, really trying. They're really, really trying. I think that's very important. But I think one of the things they got to realize also is that head injuries, concussion is not to blame for everything. I think they got to acknowledge some of the other injuries. Some guys have depressions, and depression. And what I mean by that is you give a young man, $15, $20 million. He go marry Miss Universe. He has 2 kids. All of a sudden he loses money, loses his wife. Sometimes he's depressed. And they blame concussion as the blame for that, and it's not. So I think they got to get the most qualified people to diagnose the NFL players, also to help the NFL players along with transitioning out of football, meaning that, when you get out of football, you have young men that's, in their early 20s, in their late 20s, and you're talking about now their career is over. Well, no, they got to start living. And some young men, all their life, all they've done is played football. They don't understand how to go out into the business world now, to transition over into that, and I think that's what's important to them.
Well, mental health is something that is often difficult for a lot of people to talk about. But do you see that to be more so for NFL players who we often see try to put on that macho persona, maybe don't want to talk about their emotions so much?
Oh, yeah, I see that all the time. I wrote a book a little over 10 years ago talking about dissociative identity disorder, and everyone called me crazy. Everyone said Herschel's nuts. And I said, no, guys, when you have a problem, whether it's mentally or physically, you got to get that problem taken care of. And people assume if you said you have a little bit of a mental problem, you're weak, you're less of a man. And I said, no, you're more of a man because now you recognize what's wrong and you can go get it fixed. After going through all the different things I went through, now I'm running a successful business, not just one but 2. I've had all these MMA fights, so I'm not less of anything. I'm better than I was when I first started this game.
And now, just back onto the head injuries and concussions issue, a lot of guys we're seeing, like Rob Gronkowski's had a handful of knee injuries, and a lot of players say that the knee injuries is now at more of a risk because guys can't hit high. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they do become more of a risk because now, you go to the head, that's a penalty. And one of the problems I think people are having is now they're trying to teach you how a new way of tackling. You can't tackle the way you used to. And I think that can become a problem, because if you've been doing this your whole life, now you hesitate when you have guys that are bigger today, they're faster today, so the impact going to be a little bit more forceful. That can cause more of an injury than anything. So I think the NFL is trying to protect their athletes, but at the same time, I think they're also hurting the athletes in some ways, because they're trying to protect them so much that their athletes are hesitating before you do certain things.
Herschel Walker, I want to thank you so much again for talking with us. And everyone, make sure to watch Bellator 149 on Spike TV at 9 p.m. on Friday?
Yes, Friday night, 9 o'clock Central, Eastern Time. And you're going to see Grayson versus Shamrock, Kimbo Slice against Dada. So it's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Can't wait to watch. Herschel, thanks again so much.
You're welcome.